Hello and welcome to today's episode of Juicing the Numbers, a statistics in sports podcast. I am your co-host, Joshua Tracy.
And I am your also co-host, Corwin Heller.
Today's our inaugural episode on hockey. We're going to be talking about power plays and pulling your goalie and shorthanded goals and pretty much anything that has to do with something of a man advantage. You ready for our premiere episode on hockey?
Not only our premiere episode on hockey, but our premiere episode where we're not recording together. So I'm back at school, I'm now halfway across the country and missing poor Josh.
Yeah, we're now doing this over Discord, which we had the joy of setting up before we did this, which added on more time than we thought.
A lot of time. Way more time than it should have.
We're not going to say how much.
That's all you need to know.
But hey, we're doing the whole thing now. Yeah. As we try to figure out a new podcasting schedule and all that. But I guess that comes with the territory.
I'm with it. Let's get started.
Let's get started. So I sent you this Excel spreadsheet that I worked on when I had free time at my real job, which we won't talk about. So basically, what I was trying to figure out, what I was trying to think about is, so if you're not a big hockey fan in general, right, or if you haven't watched too many games, one of the ideas is if you have a relatively small, what's the opposite of a lead?
Deficit.
If you have a relatively small deficit in the tail end of a hockey game, the last, I'll say 5 minutes of a period, you'll pull your goalie, which means you'll remove him from net, put him on the bench, and instead replace him with an additional skater, typically a forward. Those are the guys who actually make more shots to the net and get a little bit deeper into your offensive zone. So what I was trying to see if we could figure out is what would be the advantage, or how much time would be most beneficial for you to actually do that, right? So I'd say, what do you think? I'd say in general, if you're down by more than 2, you're not doing this.
No.
1, you're almost definitely doing it. 2 is if your coach is aggressive. I've seen 2 pretty frequently.
If it's an important rivalry, if it's a big game, I could see you pulling your goalie with a handful of minutes left, just to try and give yourselves some chance to come back in the game. But yeah, if it's more than that, I've never seen it. I don't know why you would. Yeah,
this would have to be if it's more than 2, it's going to have to be a playoff game in my eyes. I don't think it's worth it beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Not for regular season. And actually, that's one of the things I'll get to a little bit later on after we talk about kind of the methodology and all that stuff that went behind this. There were some greater, I guess, bigger picture questions I thought might be worth looking at after we dig into it a bit. Anyway, let's dig into it.
Let's do it.
So, the first thing I thought to look at was power play percent, right? How often do you score on a power play? For reference, if this is your first dive into the world of hockey, power play is when your opponent commits a penalty. They have to send a player to the penalty box for the minimum of 2 minutes. Okay? That gives you a 1-man advantage. It's now 5 skaters against 4 skaters, and that's called a power play. How often you score on that power play becomes your power play percentage. So I have all these stats from the 2017-2018 season, as the 2018-2019 season has yet to be concluded, so those stats would be incomplete. And if we just look at I don't know what's first on your list, but first on my list is do you see the Nashville Predators on top on the team stats tab? Yep. Okay, so their power play percentage was 21.17, which if you look down the list, there's a few 23s. The highest I'm seeing offhand is Tampa Bay Lightning at 23.91, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's the highest. So a great season, you're gonna only get a fifth of your power plays actually yielding you a goal.
So right? The highest that I just found was the Pittsburgh Penguins with 26.15%. Go Pens, boys.
Was that Oh, there it is. Yeah, there it is. So that's and they're head and shoulders above the Lightning. That's almost 2.5 percentage points is a pretty big difference.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see, like, let's say an average then at that point would be 20%. Actually, I think I have league average here at the bottom. I do. Yeah. So league average here is actually 20.18%. So it's tough is really what I'm getting at here. It's hard to score goals, kind of in hockey in general. It's easier to score with the man advantage, but it's still not like it's a guaranteed immediate result if you actually connect.
I'd say roughly, by my own rule of thumb, roughly a third of the team's goals will come from the man advantage on the power play.
Well, we can look at that. Let's look at just the Nashville Predators because they're on top and it's easy to find. They had 58 power play goals, and they had where's their total goals?
117.
Oh, goals for.
Oh, no, that's points.
Yeah, 267.
So even
yeah,
less.
so that's about a fifth. It's about 1/5. So let's call it a fifth.
So, like, the Pens had 68 power play goals to 272 goals for. So that's a little bit closer to a quarter. But still, it's not a huge percentage of your goals coming from power play.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that you're going to want to have your power play percent be high over how many of your total goals come from it. You just want to show that you're efficient on what hockey's equivalent of special teams is. On the same end, you want your penalty kill. When you commit a penalty and you lose a player, you also want that to be as high as possible because you don't want to be allowing goals, right?
Mm-hmm. Who has the highest penalty kill percentage, Josh?
I don't fucking know.
Right, it's the Los Angeles Kings with 85%.
Oh, they did have a really good penalty kill last year. Yeah, that didn't help them out much, though, did it?
No, not really.
Yeah, they're pretty bad. Anyway, so that's just to give you an idea of how hard it is to score in like the middle of a game with the man advantage. Now that it's still a beneficial thing to have, but as we'll see, it's still going to be tough to score. Anyway, so next thing I wanted to look at was penalty minutes, right? PIM, penalties in minutes.
PIMs.
And the thing that I had available to me was penalty minutes per game, so I just took that and multiplied it by 82, how many games there are in a season. And we're just going to keep looking at the Nashville Predators just because they're on top of my list. So in the last season, they had 927, so many
Led the league.
penalty minutes. Yeah, that's so many. Like, they got in a lot of trouble. So I took that. There it is. I took that and I divided it by the number of power play goals that your opponent scored. So basically what we're looking at is in 927 penalty minutes, how many minutes your own players were in the box. Did it take for your opponent to score one goal? So for every 17.2 minutes that there was a Nashville Predator in the penalty box, one goal was scored. So that's pretty good, actually, all things considered. They did a great job. They had 81.94 penalty kills, pretty darn good. Yeah, because you can see that they had 54 power play goals allowed on 299. Jesus, it's so many power play opportunities for the opponent. That's a lot.
So just based off of these calculations that we did for every team, Nashville would have ended up being around 7th in the league in penalty minutes per opponent's points per game, or opponent's points per game. Opponents.
Phrase it however you want. You don't have to go by this.
So just by our rankings with our calculations for each one of these per team, Nashville would have ranked 7th for opponents' power play goals per penalty minute.
Who would have ranked first?
That would have been the lovely Florida Panthers.
What was their number?
They were 18 point something. No, they were 20.
Wow.
20.
Jesus.
So they would go a full period on the power play, letting in 1 goal.
Let's see. They had, only 45 power play goals allowed. That's almost 10 less than the Preds. That's
still
amazing.
Had over 900 penalty minutes on the year.
902. Yeah. Who had the smallest amount of time?
All right. The smallest team with a 10.2 was your defensive team of the year, the New York Islanders.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Plus, their goalie situation last year was not good.
Everything on their defensive side of the puck was really bad.
Yeah. So that's kind of interesting. But it's not. It's really just kind of a side calculation. The next column I have here on our chart is really what we're going to start looking at for the rest of this, which is opponents' penalty in minutes per power play goal. Because that's saying is how many minutes does it take for the opposing team having a player in the box for you to score a goal, which is what we're concerned with, right? If you're going to be pulling your goalie, if you're going to be forcing yourself a man advantage, you're going to will yourself to have an extra skater on the ice. You want to know approximately how long will it take for that situation to be there for you to actually score a goal. So all I did for this is kind of the same calculation, just using the opposite numbers. I took the opposing penalty minutes for each team, and I multiplied that by 82. Opposing penalty minutes per game, multiplied that by 82 to get opposing penalty minutes for the season, and then divided that by your own power play goals, how many you actually scored, right? So I just have the top of my list. Maybe you can. Who is the best? Who scored the fewest opponent penalty minutes?
The Toronto Maple Leafs had a 10.4.
Oh, that makes sense.
Followed by the Jets, the Penguins, and the Islanders.
No, Islanders' offense last season was very good. Their defense was just atrocious. So who was at the bottom of this list? Can you give me a bottom three?
The Calgary Flames with 21.4, the Florida Panthers again with a 20.4, and the Edmonton Oilers with 20.1.
That's so bad that's saying that you could have a man advantage for a period, 1/3 of the game, and still just not get anything done. That's abysmal. Holy shit.
I love how polar opposite the Florida Panthers and the New York Islanders were last year.
Yeah, really. They're on opposite ends of the spectrum. Although they weren't far off in the standings, right? Because they both sucked.
Well, we could look. So, Florida Panthers finished the year with 96 points, and the Islanders finished with 80.
Oh, wow. The Islanders were even worse. Jesus. Yeah, I forgot because they had they were in a playoff spot for the first third of the season and then just kind of fell off a cliff. But it is what it is.
It turns out all they needed to do to succeed was get rid of John Tavares.
Yeah, truly. Just really holding the team back, I guess. So all right. So now we have the basis of kind of what we're getting at, right? So now we have an idea that I still just have the Nashville Predators on the top of my list because I don't feel like sorting it out. It takes the Nashville Predators 13.6 minutes to score a single power play or man advantaged goal. Okay? So now, obviously, they're not going to look at that and go, 13.5 minutes, guaranteed we're scoring a goal, right? Because for one thing, that's never a guarantee. And for another thing, you're not going to pull your goalie 7 minutes into a period at an attempt to get one goal.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So now my next idea was how can you show an increasing return in how long you're pulling your goalie for and to as a percentage of how likely you are to yield a goal. Okay? And it actually took me a long time to think about this, and it actually isn't as hard as I thought it would be. I spent a long time thinking about something that was actually kind of really, really simple.
What'd you do?
Just take minutes and then divide it by your offensive penalty, opponent penalty minutes divided by power play goals. So if it takes Nashville Predators to score one power play goal or one man advantage goal in 13.6 minutes, if you take that number and just put it as the denominator, with the numerator being the number of minutes you want to have your goalie pulled for, that'll give you a percentage of pretty much how likely you are to score a goal, right? Because if you put 13.6 on top and 13.6 on bottom, like that's saying that there's... Now, granted, I just said it wouldn't be a 100% chance, and it wouldn't be a 100% chance in real life, but for the purpose of this kind of little model, the longer you have yourself up a man, the more likely you are to do it, and this also takes into account your team's proficiency given the course of a season of how likely you were to do it. So if you are the Nashville Predators, you need a goal, all right? Let's say you pull your goalie with 4 minutes left in the game, okay? That gives you a 29% chance of scoring based on their performance over the course of the 2017-2018 season, and how they did with a man advantage in a given amount of time. That's pretty good. You'll take that every single time. And the thing is, so that's 29%, right? If you do for 4 minutes, if you do 5 minutes, okay, with the exact same denominator, your number is going to go up to a 36.7, 36.8% chance. So you can see as every minute goes by, or every additional minute you have with your goalie out, your odds will increase, which is, again, obvious. That's the longer you're on a man advantage, the more likely you are to score. What I was trying to figure out here is, given your team's ability to score, how does that affect how soon you should be pulling, right? Do you have anything to say on this?
I have some critiques, just that I've thought of as you were saying this. So that 29% is the likelihood of you to score on the regular man advantage. What that doesn't take into account is the fact that your defensive players, like, you can't just throw, just your biggest offensive forward in there and pull all your defense and just go straight offense, because you can't really let the defending team that's up handle the puck without the goalie in net, because they could just shoot it right down the ice and pop it in the empty net, and that's it. Game over, no questions asked. So you can't really play the same type of defense when you're on the typical man advantage and when you're playing without your goalie.
So I'm ignoring defense for this. For a couple reasons. One, because that just gets way too messy if you include defense. But for another thing, if you're pulling your goalie, I don't think it matters. Like, if you're pulling your goalie, it means that you're desperate to tie this game, and you don't have the confidence that you can do it 5-on-5. You don't have the confidence you can do it even strength. So if that's the case, if we're at this point in the game, does it really matter?
I guess that matters more when it's only a 1-goal differential versus when it's multiple goals, So if it's multiple goals, if it's another one that really doesn't affect you too much, you're down by such a margin that you really need all offense, and you just need to go all holds barred and just go all out to score. But when it's only 1 goal and it's still within reach, within reason, I feel like you can't really pull your goalie too soon there. It's not something that we can measure with these statistics, which is why I was hesitant to bring it up.
No, I see where you're coming from, and you're right. This brings into the very non-numerical aspect of the game. This is strategy now.
The exact same thing we talked about with football. Like, we can't have everything come from the numbers.
Of course, and this is an attempt by me to try to bring some numbers into this aspect of the strategy game. Oh, one thing I forgot to pull up, although I've seen talked about a lot this season, is that number of goalie pulling attempts has increased drastically this season. Also, and thus with it, the number of empty net goals has increased drastically this season. But in my mind, just as a observer of the sport more so than anything else, it's really desperation.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm trying to figure out, and this was a little bit too much for the scope of what I was trying to do with this episode, is kind of how much do you value every point in hockey? Not every goal, every team point. Yeah, so 2 points for a win, 1 point for an overtime loss, blah, 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 blah. So let's say you're vying for, like, winning the division, right? Or you're vying for a higher seed or what have you, and we'll get to that a little bit later, too. You can't lose ground from losing games. You can only gain ground from winning games.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't value getting 0 points, or like you don't value the risk of getting 0 points as much as you value the risk of getting 1 or 2 points from potentially going to overtime. Like if you were the Winnipeg Jets last year when the Nashville Predators won the President's Trophy.
Mm-hmm.
No, the Capitals won the President's Trophy. No, the Nashville Predators won the President's Trophy. Capitals was 2 years ago.
You should know that because Nashville raised a banner for winning the President's Trophy.
Oh my God, they did. That's so sad. Anyway, so if you're the Jets, like, I mean, the President's Trophy, by the way, is when your team has the most points in the league that year. So the Preds had it, you know, like they were going to win the division. So if you were the Winnipeg Jets and you said to yourself, we want to win the division, you might say to yourself, all right, let's start pulling our goalie way sooner on games that we're down because we're going to need more points because we're making the playoffs either way, so we don't have to worry about the detriment of getting 0 points in this game.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we just go balls out and try to take every game we're behind only 1 or 2 goals in? You know what I mean?
Right.
So this is an attempt by me to get some kind of a measurement for the benefit of doing this. Now, granted, there's a lot of other factors. There's the gameplay, there's the situation, there's how early in the season is it, how late in the season is it, how much are you down by. But in general, I think what's interesting about it is that, at least with the kind of half-assed odds I gave us on this, it does seem to be pretty valuable.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? If you have yourself, what did I say, with 4 minutes, 29%?
Mm-hmm.
A 29% chance of scoring, that's pretty high.
Oh, yeah.
Because what differs between this and your traditional power play is that you can will this into existence. You can say to the team, all right, guys, I'm going to give you another dude to just go fuck around with. All right? Let's make this happen. And you can do this at the 60-second remaining mark. You can do this at the 6-minute remaining mark. Like, you can really do it whenever you feel as though it's necessary. So, let me ask you, what do you think the break-even point is? At what point do you think, statistically, it becomes worth it, like, to do this? Assuming a 1-goal deficit.
I think when the expected value of that remaining goal, so the 1 point for the goal times the percentage chance, that gives you the probability, and since it's 1 point, it's, very simple. I think then when that's higher than the expected points from winning the game versus losing the game. So basically when that probability of scoring the goal is equal to or higher than the expected difference in winning the game versus losing the game, I think that's when it would be most valuable to. I think that's the break-even point, essentially. Fuck.
I've been having a lot of fun thinking to myself about, like, when this would be most applicable. Now, granted, this also assumes that there's a static play style on the opposing team, and this also changes a lot because instead of when there's a man advantage via power play, there are 9 skaters on the ice. This we're going to be having 11 skaters on the ice, so that clutters up the open space a little bit, and blah 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 blah. What I do think is interesting about this, giving yourself a man advantage, whether naturally in the course of a game via power plays or at the end of the game via pulling your goalie, it's so much of an advantage that I like the fact that teams are playing around with it more in the regular season. I feel like this is going to become kind of like one of the new special teams things that teams are going to look at is, how are we going to construct a, 2-minute power play style offense with 6 skaters, no goalie, and, 2 minutes left in the game.
Right.
Right. So the idea that I came into the episode with, that I was doing research with to initially, for the initial topic was, how soon should you pull your goalie? What I ended up finding, though, is it ended up being a lot more complicated of a question than I had thought. I thought I might find something a little bit more cut and dry. Not that I thought this would be easy, but I thought maybe I could find something relatively definitive. I ended up really interested in with what I did find in that, the whole odds change per team based on power play efficiency and how you do with them individually. I thought that seemed like such a no-shit point in retrospect. But I did have a great time kind of familiarizing myself with a lot of the power play stats. So one of the other things I found was interesting, though, and I told you this briefly before we started recording, they don't break it down by major and minor.
Which doesn't make any sense. I had
kind of, none. So for those of you who don't know, a minor penalty it's 2 minutes, a double minor is 4 minutes, but a minor penalty ends after you score a goal. Okay? A major penalty is at least 5. And does not end after the team on the man advantage scores a goal. It keeps going. And that's a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I was kind of surprised that there wasn't a breakdown between the two, because it does affect stats a lot. If you have 5-minute major, right, and they score 2.5 minutes in, and then they don't score for the rest, well, then those 5 minutes are still going to get thrown into your opponent's penalty minutes, which will show up on your stats and show up on your power play. Show up on your power play efficiency, like what we put together here. But then they don't separate it out. I did end up finding a sheet that had it, and I thought we could look at it. I put it in Sheet 2, yeah. This is still all 2017, and just to look at it's Mage.
Mage.
Yeah, that's the number of major penalties you took.
Okay, I thought you were saying something completely different. Never mind.
Ain't there some shit to look at that? Florida, 49 major penalties. But anyway, so I was looking at this. So, for reference, Calgary is in second place with 32. So that's a 17 penalty difference. And for major penalties, that's enormous. And then I remembered to myself, I think Florida might have set a record for fights per game last year, if I recall correctly.
God fucking bless them.
Fights will get you major penalties a lot. So that makes sense. So if you keep that in mind, so let's look at Florida for just a hot second. So they had 49, they committed 49 major penalties, right? And their opponent's penalty minutes per opponent's goal scoring. So how many minutes that the Florida Panthers were on? How many minutes there was a Florida Panther player in the penalty box did it take for each opponent to take for their opponent to score was 20, right? That was them?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
20.0.
So now this is why I think this is interesting, because of what I just said. So it's saying that Florida could kill a 20-minute penalty, right? But when they had so many majors, there's so much time where the opponent still could have scored. Their penalty kill wasn't bad. 80%'s not bad. It's not great. It's not
But 5
bad.
straight minutes of penalty kill multiple times a game sometimes, that's brutal. You can't... You can't defend that.
You can't, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I wish there was a way to separate it out because it changes. Like, it makes their penalty kill at 80% look worse than it is because it's actually probably better than that since they killed majors instead of minors. So there was more raw time there. It's also going to make this whole 20 minutes per penalty look worse than it is because chances are their opponents were scoring at some point into those major penalties, which I also had a hard time finding how often did a major penalty result in a goal. Because if like I said, if you have a 5-minute penalty and you score 2 minutes into it, that's a successful power play for the opposing team, right? Even if you don't score for the remaining 3 minutes of it, that still counts as a power play goal and a successful power play. So it's gonna alter the way these stats are gonna look because Florida's going to then kill 3 minutes remaining of a power play, which is more than a regular power play, but it won't go down as a penalty kill because they allowed a goal earlier in that power play. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, it's a really weird way of doing stats.
Fucking NFL, man. Guys, why can't everyone just learn from baseball and just keep stats of everything?
You can go on Baseball Reference and find how often, what's the just raw number of sliders that Jacob deGrom threw. It's so specific.
And it's perfect. It's exactly what you want.
Oh, you like it, Daddy.
All right. This is no longer a PG-13 podcast.
So, anything you want to say on the difference between minors and majors?
Don't fight. No, I take that back. Please fight. Fighting makes hockey more fun. You sit in the box, it is what it is. But don't stop fighting.
So then I was wondering just a little bit because I saw shorthanded goals and I thought to myself, all right, let's look at that. Because as Corwin said previously, if you do kind of get scored on in one of these goalie pulled situations, you're probably not going to pull your goalie again that game unless you, I don't know, really need it. So if you go to empty net stats, which is our first page, it shows you how many times each team pulled their goalie, right? Mm-hmm. That's in the count section. And then goals scored, goals allowed, and then a success rate. So let me just stop a filter on this real quick. Who pulled their goalie the most times? The Chicago Blackhawks. This is also 2017, 2018 numbers. Pulled their goalie 21 times, right?
Ridiculous.
They scored 3 goals.
So roughly
they allowed 10.
So roughly 1 out of every 4 games, they're behind enough to pull their goalie.
And they think it's advantageous enough to pull their goalie.
Right.
So their success rate was 14.3%. That does not take into account the negative damage done by the goals allowed, although previously said you're already losing, I guess, so what does it matter? What do you make of this?
That's way too much. I mean, the fact that you pulled your goalie once every 4 games and you scored 3 goals in the entirety of that, it's too much. Like, clearly someone had to have looked at this and realized, hey, this isn't working. Like, it's too...
Let me ask you...
It's too big of a sample size for them to still think that it's effective. Like, some of these teams who did it, 8, 10, 11 times and scored once, twice, 3 times, okay. Like, it's a small sample size, you're bound to improve it. But 21 times is too much.
Well, now let me ask you this. If they think they're not winning the game anyway, could you view those 3 goals as additional team points?
I mean, I guess it depends on the deficit, though. Like if they're scoring those 3 goals and
of course,
a 1-goal differential, it's hell yeah. But if you're down 3 goals, you pull your goalie to see if you could get a little something going, and you score.
Yeah, no, you're right. Let's just assume all of these. I know that's not going to be the case. Let's assume all of these are one goal games.
Okay, that's fair.
Just because I don't want to have to give caveats to literally everything.
Right. No, I get that.
Although I get where you're coming from though. Like I thought the same thing. So let's assume these are all one goal games. Mm-hmm. You pulled your goalie 21. Which, first off, if you're pulling your goalie 21 times,
that's not good.
You must suck.
That's not a good sign.
But now let's say like you have a weak goalie play and you have a good offense. Like let's say you're the New York Islanders from last year. Mm-hmm. Okay, does this become a more viable strategy in close games? Like could you say for the Chicago Blackhawks that they squeezed 3 additional, like I said, team points out of those 21 goalie pulling attempts?
In theory, sure. Why not?
And do you think that that's worth it? Like, if you're the coach and you think to yourself, we're fucking losing this game anyway, or I don't know, you need to save your job by having a season that shows something points wise, you know?
Ugh, sorry. Yeah, no, I think that's worth it.
So let's look at who scored the most. It's a 3-way tie between the Florida Panthers, the New Jersey Devils, and the Colorado Avalanche. Each scored 4. The Panthers and the Devils each had 15 goalie pulling attempts. The Avalanche had 14 goalie pulling attempts. So they had a success rates of 26.7, 26.7, and 28.6. Would you say then that these teams should have pulled their goalie more since their success rates were so high?
Again, it's hard to say without realizing what the situations were. I mean, 28% is huge.
It's massive. Granted, small sample size, but still, that's really big.
I mean, yeah. I mean, if we're just looking at the raw numbers and nothing else, then yeah, take more chances, and you have the defense and you have the goalie to make that happen. So why not?
So let's say you're starting off your season, right? Mm-hmm. You're Coach Corwin. That's okay. Me. That's you. And at what point, you know, you're it's an early season game. You know, it's October. Mm-hmm. You're down by 1 against a divisional opponent. You want to make a splash. You pull your goalie, and it works out. Okay. Do you think to yourself, let's never do this again? Or do you think to yourself, let's try to make this a skill?
Let's fucking do it. Let's go all in. Let's keep it happening.
So now what's your cutoff point for success? Like, at what point do you as a coach think to yourself, this needs to be worth it X% of time for us to actually continue doing this?
I'd probably say 20%.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. I might go a little bit higher, just because if I'd want it to be a better chance than our power. No, 20% is so fair. It's when it really is tough to say. It's really tough to demand more from that. So the other question I came up with while going through this, because I kept trying to think about why you would be desperate to pull your goalie for a win in the regular season, right? Why would you be desperate to pull your goalie in the regular season? Unless you're in like a tight race, unless like you're like vying for a wild card spot. Because there's no first round buys like there are with football. Mm-hmm. There's home field, or home ice, I should say. Only if you finish first, though. I get wanting to win the most games you can possibly win, but Is there really much of an advantage to the way NHL does their seeding?
I mean, I guess at the end of the year I could see it being something bigger where you're trying to get a certain matchup with a certain team. But, I mean, 7-game series, it's not like it's not like in the NBA where a 1 seed is so exponentially better than an 8 seed. That it matters all that much. I mean, most of these playoff teams are in the same realm together. I don't know. I think it's less important in the regular season by a significant margin.
It's tough with these desperation plays, especially something that's as risky as this. Like if you're pinch hitting in baseball, like it doesn't cost you anything. You're not letting anything up in defense. You know, if you are for throwing Hail Marys in football, I mean, like every game costs so much because there's such a limited quantity of them. You know, each game affects your standing so greatly. Plus, you can kind of pass things off and be like, it's basically a long punt. It's this, it's that, it's whatever. I was really having a hard time trying to decipher what I thought would be great reasoning for this, just because the stakes seem so low. And that's why I came to the kind of conclusion with it that the reason teams must be doing it so much more is that they must think that it's hard that they're not going to get it 5-on-5, that they just doubt their 5-on-5, and that they value that the possibility of the one loser point, the loser point from losing in overtime, more than they value the possibility of detriment that comes from taking no points in the game at all, right? They're taking a real high risk, high reward stance on it, which, I mean, I think I get. I mean, the stakes are low, but if the percentages are there, I get it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, what if you are a terrible hockey team, okay? You are the Detroit Red Wings.
They are bad.
They are bad. What if you played the entire third period without a goalie?
What's the success percentage on that?
Let's say you have a 25% chance of scoring.
Just at all in the third period.
Oh, no, did you mean with the man advantage or no? Well, yeah, with the man advantage, 25%. Yeah, I guess at all. Because you're bad. And then,
well, what was the
but
stat
we'll say,
what was the stat you did earlier about, like, what the
increasing time? Just take the number of minutes, so it would be 20 divided by what was the Red Wings number for that?
Let's see, what was it? OPIM over PPG.
Yeah,
16.6.
Oh well, so because the denominator is 16.6, it says that you have a 120% chance of scoring. Which actually, I mean, you can cap it at 100. That does make a lot of sense. No one's killing a 20-minute penalty.
Right.
I'm sorry, even to a terrible team, you're not killing a 20-minute penalty or a 20-minute man advantage. Right. So let's say, you're guaranteed to get one goal. We'll put it that way. You're guaranteed to get a goal, okay? But you have a 50% chance, 50, of letting in more than one. So effectively cutting you off entirely from the chance of victory.
Well, at that point, you're basically saying you're going to win 50% of your games, roughly. If you're at least going into a tied, and I mean, like, let's just say we're going into the third period relatively close. So we'll say that we're going in even strength into the third period. We're essentially going to win 50% of our games, which the Detroit Red Wings did not do last year. So I say, fuck yes, let's do this. Yeah, that's a 5.5% increase in the amount of wins that you'll get over the course of a season.
That's insane. That's so much. So let me ask you this. What about pulling your goalie on power plays? I thought about this a lot while I was doing this, because think about what you often see. Now, granted, shorthanded goals are a thing, and that's actually why I added the shorthanded goals column. You'll see that. Hold on 1 second. Let me just do a filter on this real quick. Shorthanded goals defended. This is what I want to see. Oh my God, Colorado let up 13 shorthanded goals last year. That is so bad. But you see that like there's a 95.6% chance you're not letting up a shorthanded goal, and that's the lowest in the league last year, right? The lowest. Now, granted, your goalie still does stuff, and he's got to make sure that the puck doesn't roll into the net, or someone could have a really great forecheck, or blah 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 blah. But like, if we could increase your power play numbers by like, we wouldn't double, but let's increase it by like 30-40%. But you increase the chance you're going to get scored on by roughly the same amount. I don't know, but like, what do you think? I obviously it gives you a better chance of scoring, but like, do you take the risk?
I think at that point it comes down to the fact that you have like too many men on the ice. I know that sounds outrageous, but having a 6-4 advantage is nice. But at the same time, at what point does it become too many cooks in the kitchen?
Never. I think if a team could send out 9 skaters, they'd send out 9 skaters.
All right. I just don't know if they have enough room to like genuinely operate and move the puck around to be able to get effective open shots.
I'd imagine it's more of a heat map conversation at that point, where you're just generating pressure at the net.
I mean, I guess if you did that, you could have, 4 guys just hanging out. You could have a 5-on-4 and still have someone, just a blue liner, hanging at the back, and just and just have them basically just be a rover, be a single high safety, and just prevent anyone from having a 1-on-1, 1-on-2 breakout.
That's kind of what I was thinking, actually. If I was a team to do this, I don't think I'd add a 4th forward. I think I'd add a 3rd defenseman, just for blue line security, keeping power plays alive. But like, what additional success rate on power plays would this be worth to you for you to consider if you were a coach?
10%.
Let's say. So going from a 20% success rate on the power play to a 30%?
Yeah, I'd say 10%. I mean, over the course of a year, that'd be... I mean, hell, considering how many shorthand goals you'd probably let up, I think that evens out nicely. Look at the fucking Pens. I love it. We didn't score a single empty netter, but we allowed 6.
That's really surprising. 10 attempts too. That ain't nothing. That's really weird. Same thing with the Lightning, though. Look at that. 8 attempts, 0 conversions, 3 empty net goals.
Same with the Blues, except 4 allowed.
Actually, look at the Islanders here. 9 attempts, 0 goals, 7 allowed.
Jesus.
I mean, it's so weird because that's a 0% conversion, and you gave up 9 additional goals. But at the same time, I can't help but think maybe they should have just done it more, because they really did suck. And I really the thing
I mean, honestly, their defense wasn't helping them at all last year. So why not? I mean, your team is based entirely around offense. Go do it.
This is kind of what I'm saying, and I think this is kind of. I think sports in general tend to flow between favoring the defense and favoring the offense, and you see this in every single sport. Baseball was very offense heavy until pitchers got too dominant, and then pitchers owned, the 60s and 70s, and then they lowered the mound and like blah 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 blah. Changing rules in the NFL to favor the offense to the defense, all this kind of stuff. Happened in the NHL. They increased goalie pad size, and now they're decreasing goalie pad size because goalies got too good. Basically, the point is that there's this ever increasing desire to innovate and find a new advantage, and it's the modern way of doing it is through stats and numbers, seeing what percentage you can get yourself, and seeing where there is an advantage to be had. And I can't help but think that there's really reasons to do the whole pull your goalie thing for both good teams and bad teams, because if you're bad, you probably weren't winning the game anyway, so why not juggernaut your offense? And if you're good, that means you're probably going to have a higher conversion percentage, even though we didn't see it with the Pens last season, which is still just bizarre. But it's also a very small sample size.
It happens.
It does. So, also, I mean, it could be that they just didn't have their goalie pulled for a long time. You know, they did it with only 2 minutes left because they didn't care that much about losing the game or getting scored on with the empty net as much as they were just trying to do it for a look or whatever. But I can't help but think that this is going to be, and so far this season has been, something we'll be seeing more often, because it does make sense for both sides, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if your team was losing by a goal and you're getting near the end of the game, wouldn't you be a little bit pissed off if your team didn't pull their goalie in like a 1-goal game?
To some degree, yeah. I mean, you don't have to pull them for 4 minutes, but give them a minute, 2 minutes, work with something.
I think 3 is usually, for me as a fan, where I'm like, all right, 2 minutes is nice, but if we're going to do it, we might as well do it now. I've also thought about, what about the possibility of instead of waiting for the end of the game where you have this natural stop, which is the point at which you lose, doing it at random points in the game? You know? Like, why not do it in the second period? You're struggling, you got nothing going, you're down by a goal.
Kind of like...
Why not?
So it would kind of just be like how NHL uses fights to kind of boost momentum and team morale and stuff like that. Pull your goalie. See if you can get a goal, get some shit going. I fucking love it.
I mean, sure, we see teams pull their goalies when the situation's right, when there's a delayed penalty call and you're just waiting for the opposition to touch up because you know that they're not allowed to possess at all to score a goal. But at the same time, I mean, if you've been causing trouble in your opponent's zone and you feel as though you can get a defenseman out there, like we said, to just shore up the blue line for a hot minute, could the risk be worth it if you have a high-powered offense? Or could this be like a baseball type situation where you're moneyballing that shit? You know, your goalie's mediocre and you're just trying to finagle goals as best you can. You know what I mean by that?
Mm-hmm. Fuck it, I love this idea.
Now, of course, like I said, the time aspect is what I came into this with. If you pull your goalie if you're the Nashville Predators, you pull your goalie for 4 minutes, you have a 29% chance of doing it. If you pull your goalie for 5 minutes, you have a 36% chance of doing it based on the itty-bitty amount of math I did here.
Right.
But I also think this does raise good points as to the fact that as time goes on, in general, the longer you have a man advantage, the more likely you are to score a goal. Why not continue to give yourself that man advantage as long as you believe it is worth the risk of what could happen by having no goalie?
Mm-hmm.
Let me put it to you like this and get your opinion on it like this, right?
Okay.
If you're the Tampa Bay Rays, you can't afford to go out and sign Max Scherzer to a free agent contract like the Nationals did, okay? So instead, you're rolling with openers, okay? Now, granted, that's a payroll issue, okay? But it's also a talent issue. So let's look at the NHL. Like, let's say you're the Detroit Red Wings, and you are in the middle of, like, a rebuild, and you don't have talent on your team, or the Kings, because they can't score a goal to save their fucking life, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe this kind of strategic deployment of the empty net play, you could even call it, could be a way for you to try to squeeze out some kind of offense, you know? Maybe set up your offense around offensive zone possession time rather than shots on goal, and then use long stretches of being in the opponent's zone as when you pull your goalie.
Okay.
And then we could see our percentages take into effect there. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I got you. So if we look at a team like the Kings, who, Jonathan Quick is a little bit past his prime now. Their offense is putting up fucking nothing every week outside of Anze Kopitar. Yeah, I mean, you really have nothing to lose. You're in essentially a race for the first overall pick. Why not try this shit out? Like, they already fired their coach, or was it that they fired somebody in their front office? It might have been their GM. I'm not sure. But you got nothing to lose. Like, literally nothing to lose.
And I really can't help but think this isn't a bad... Because, Alain Vigneault, when he was the coach of the Rangers, his offense was based around breakouts, right? His offense was based around getting speedy dudes to get takeaways and just charge down the ice before the defenders can really meet up with them, and just kind of banking on that. There was no forecheck. There was no real strong possession times. It was all about breakaways, right? So you can base your offense around different things, okay? I really think that if you base it around time instead of like stuff like generating shots on goal, which is still important, but generating shots on goal, generating shots towards goal, and like all that, generate it around time, and then let the other things that happen with time of possession come naturally. I think it's an interesting idea. I'm not sure it would work, right? But thinking about offensive zone time and then lead that into pulling your goalie and giving yourself an extra skater wherever you think that would be most effective, I think could be a kind of also a fun way of watching bad teams try something. And like I said, I don't think it necessarily needs to be at the end of the game. I get why they wait for the end of the game, because it's desperation mode. We need this. We have proved we can't score to the same degree as our opponent in 5-on-5. We need a man advantage. But, I mean, if you could make this a skill, if you could make this part of your team's strategy to play with 6 men, to keep pucks in the offensive zone for long periods of time, and then let your forwards eventually give themselves the time to generate opportunities, I think that could be an interesting way of running your offense.
I'd love to just see them, like you said earlier with the Rays, just try something new. Just do something different. Do something that hasn't been done in the NHL, and see if you can, I don't want to say change the sport, but just change the thinking behind pulling the goalie and just bring some fresh air into it. Why not?
I mean, what was the last time the NHL was changed by a player? Martin Brodeur with the trapezoid?
Tom Wilson with player safety.
Man, fuck Tom Wilson. He's such an asshole.
God, I fucking hate how much of a man rocket he is. Not a big deal.
Yeah.
He's a good-looking dude. He's a man rocket. It's a shame.
You've now talked as much about Tom Wilson's looks as you have this topic in the last 5 minutes.
Well, go fuck yourself.
Don't roll your eyes at me. But so, like, give me some thoughts pertaining to the time aspect of this, because I think that's kind of like the main idea,
I know. I'm just so torn on whether or not I would be able to get behind doing this for longer periods of time, knowing that teams are going to score against you. Like, on the shorthand, it's just too easy to do it with the man advantage. I just can't see myself doing it longer than 2, maybe 3 minutes at a time. I like the idea of spreading it out throughout the game. It's such a huge risk.
No, you're totally right. It is. Like, this is, I'm not saying a team should do this for a whole season just because I said so. This is really just kind of an exercise in thought in the realm of sports. How good do you think you'd have to be at empty net goals in their traditional goalie pulled goals at the end of the game in their traditional spot, 2-3 minutes left, for your coach to say, hey, let's try this in like the second period?
So you're asking how good do you have to be doing it at the end of the game to be able to do it at other points during the game?
Yeah, like let's say like your team's stupid good at it, and then like the first 20 games you've pulled your goalie, I don't know, nothing unreasonable. Like, let's say 4 times, and you scored on all 4. Like, is that enough for your coach to be like? At what point would your coach be like, I mean, we're getting really good at this. Like, why don't we try this in like the end of the second or like the middle of the third instead of the end?
I'd have to say you'd need at least like a 50% success rate. More than that, probably, with at least like 10 in the sample size. Doing it 10 times.
I was going to say 75, honestly.
Yeah.
I think it. While I do think it's fun, I do think it'd be a really, really interesting exercise in creativity in football. I think it'd have to be something like so high. Your coach is like, we need to try this. Like, we're succeeding so much, it doesn't make sense not to try it, you know?
I could see it being done throughout the game as like a single possession kind of advantage. So you have the puck behind your own net. You know, the other team's racing back to their goal. Why not just pull your goalie there and just have a guy pop right on out and develop your own little fast break type deal? And then as soon as the other team gets possession back, you send the goalie right back out. So not just have it be time-based, but be possession-based.
I love that. That's a great idea.
Let's.
Do you think anyone's ever going to do it?
I'll call up Mike Sullivan real quick and see if I can get him on board with this.
Oh yeah. I'll shoot a text over to David Quinn.
Hey man, I know.
Just be like,
I know Matt Murray has won like 7 games and has 2 shutouts since he's come back from injury, but let's play him less.
Oh shit! I just realized that we're both wearing our hockey sweaters.
Yeah, I got my Stanley Cup sweater on.
I got my super big Rangers logo sweater on. I love this guy. He's my friend.
Speaking of which, Finland just won the World Juniors.
Yeah, dude, I fucking saw that shit. It's wild.
Kind of upset USA lost, but
I'm also not much invested. Also, it was M20.
Yeah.
Which leads me to believe that there is probably like an M18 or some shit. Anyway, anything else you really have to say on this? Any closing thoughts?
No. I say what I need to say. I usually don't have closing thoughts.
Yeah, mine would just be, I'm probably going to title this episode something along the lines of, when should you pull your goalie? Because that was my initial idea. And so if you listen to all this and you're like, I don't know when to pull my goalie. How am I supposed to know when to pull my goalie? I'm sorry. And I think that's going to be the thing with a lot of these topics is a lot of these are going to be thoughts, and they're going to kind of take you where the numbers take you. And I think that's kind of what makes this kind of shit interesting, because I still don't know when to pull your goalie.
Oh, not at all.
But what I do have but we have a better I think a better scope on now.
We got shit we want to try out.
We have shit we want to try, and we have an idea of how effective. We turn this in from a how long should you do this thing, and we turn that conversation into maybe it is actually about time rather than it is about having the man advantage. And that's kind of what I like with these kinds of topics, because they're going to become. You're going to go down a rabbit hole. And you're going to just kind of have to go with the ride of where it's bringing you.
Right.
Because now we ended up talking about, one of the first questions I wrote down here that had nothing to do with this topic was, what does seeding really matter in the NHL? And it made me think, no, fucking doesn't.
Not at all.
Really doesn't, unless you get a top seed and want to play a bad team. But even then, with the stupid-ass way that the NHL does their playoff structure, you could end up facing a very good team if you're the number 1 seed, because go fuck yourself.
Go fuck yourself, San Diego.
So, I don't have an answer for when you should pull your goalie. I guess if you're really desperate, obviously sooner is better, although I don't think that's much of a revelation. What I do feel comfortable with, though, is having a new kind of idea pop out of this. Or what I do feel as though we accomplished was having an even more creative thought instead of when should you pull your goalie, of why don't you do it all the time?
So I guess what you're really trying to say is that we're innovative geniuses. Well, all right, you get most of the credit. You're an innovative genius, and I'm going to ride your coattails. And we should be given the reins of an NHL franchise. Give us the Yotes. Give us a nice young bad team still that could use a little experimenting.
I mean, they do have the youngest GM in sports. Mm-hmm. No, but what I'm saying is, I like sports.
Sports are fun.
So do you have any closing thoughts now?
I mean, I like sports too. I'd like to see more teams. Like, honestly, even if it isn't just this, I want to see some NHL teams just try something different for once. It's not yet at that level of super tradition focused that baseball is, but it still is very traditional heavy, if you know what I mean.
Well, actually, I think I got what you mean. I was going to say that it's probably the least innovative of the other sports, just because it's so based on fundamentals, whereas baseball changes so much, and the NFL changes so much. Like, there's trick plays in the NFL, and there's all kinds of funky things you could you got Waxahachie swaps in baseball. You've got what the Brewers did of pulling their starter after one batter. There's funky strategy things being done in MLB. There's funky
basic
strategy
shifts.
things being done in NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but what's an innovation you've seen over the last 10 years in the NHL?
That hasn't been directly related to the change in rules by the NHL. Speed is really it.
I'm hard-pressed to call speed an innovation.
Right. It's just, okay, if we're faster, we can score more goals. That's not really innovation. That's just changing your players.
Yeah, I guess maybe the most, and I'm hard-pressed to call this innovation either, is the change of shooters going from the 5-hole to going to the short side. Yeah. And even then, that's not really much of an innovation as it is just much adaptation. Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, and this isn't me trying to... We're both wearing licensed NHL apparel.
We like hockey.
Or we bought for ourselves. Yeah, we like hockey. It's just some fun shit to do with numbers to give you some fun things to talk about on a show.
I mean, I guess that's really the only way we can describe what we do here.
Yeah, so, that's it, man. You got anything else?
No, I'm all set.
All right, then...
I don't have a holiday to close out on today.
Yeah, go fuck
Happy
yourself.
January 6th. That sounds terrible.
Sure. So if you want to see this myriad of useless information and numbers, you can find it on our website. It's juicingthenumbers.wixsite.com/website. So it's juicingthenumbers.wixsite.com/website. You can follow us on Twitter. We're at juicingpod. It's POD. And you can send us an email at juicingthenumbers at gmail.com. Juicingthenumbers@gmail.com. And that's it from me, Corwin. You got anything else? I think I've said that 5 times.
If you're listening in Mexico, happy Day of the Holy Kings.
Cutting that out.
Okay. All right. I looked up all the different holidays.